Three categories of crime are under the court's jurisdiction: crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. Another problem that the International Criminal Court solves is the problem of immunity. Numerous dictators negotiate amnesty for past crimes as a condition for relinquishing their power. A recent example of this was General Pinochet, the dictator of Chile, who was accused of widespread human rights torture, detention of political opponents, and murder while he was in office. As a condition of relinquishing his power, he negotiated an amnesty with Chile. However, the International Criminal Court arrested and prosecuted him. The court confirmed that people tried with such crimes as torture can be prosecuted anywhere in the world. The Holocaust was a time in Germany from 1939 to 1945 when Hitler and the Nazis were in power and persecuted many people. Among others, Jews, Poles, Slavs, Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, priests, ministers, homosexuals, members of labor unions, the mentally retarded, communists, and other political rivals were targeted. Altogether, Hitler and the Nazis killed about 11 million people through starvation, torture, and executions. One person targeted by the Nazis was Martin Niemöller. Niemöller was a German pastor at the time of the Holocaust. He founded the German organization Presetntations, which was an organization that stood up for the rights of Jews who had converted to Christianity. He was arrested and spent over a year in prison before being brought to trial. At his trial, he was charged and convicted of activities against the state for some of the things that he had preached. He was found guilty and sentenced to prison, as well as being fined. However, since the amount of time he'd spent awaiting his trial was longer than his sentence called for, the court released him. As soon as he left the courtroom, he was arrested by the Gestapo and spent the rest of the war in the Dachau and Stockhaven prison camps, where he was released by the Allies. Martin Niemöller was anti-Semitic at the beginning of the war. However, while he was in the concentration camps, he realized that every human being has value. He had to care about everyone. He wrote the poem, "First They Came." Over the years, there has been many different versions of this poem. The one that he is supposed to have liked best went something like this. In Germany, first they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the communist, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. I think this is a memorable poem because it points to one reason that the Nazis were so successful. People felt that if they weren't being the ones targeted, then they didn't have to do anything about the Nazis. However, as Niemöller points out in his poem, if everyone feels that way, then no one ever acts. The first trials for human rights violations were held after the Holocaust. The United States government felt that the trials should be held in Germany. However, few German cities in 1945 had a courthouse still standing that was large enough for such a major trial to take place. One of the few that did was Nuremberg, site of the Zeppelin fields and some of Hitler's most spectacular rallies. It was also from Nuremberg that Hitler proclaimed the infamous Nuremberg laws, which stripped Jews of their property and basic rights. 12 trials involving hundreds of defendants took place in Nuremberg from 1945 to 1949. I will concentrate on the major war figures trial. A prosecutional staff of 600 Americans, plus additional hundreds from the USSR, Britain, and France, arrived, began interviewing potential witnesses, and examining documents from among the 100,000 that were captured for the prosecution case. German lawyers, some of whom were Nazis themselves, arrived, began interviewing their clients, and preparing their case. The greatest of all the charges was the so-called final solution, the mass murder of millions of Jews in the concentration camps. The first phase of the prosecution focused on establishing the criminality of the various events, while the second half focused on establishing the guilt of individual defendants. The defenses were: 1. We are merely following orders. 2. You also did similar crimes. The victors had also committed similar atrocities. However, since they were the victors, they weren't being brought before a war crimes tribunal. And 3. No trial without prior law. The laws that they were being charged with breaking were made laws after the war. Therefore, they could not be charged with violating them. In the end, all of the defendants were found guilty. Thousands of other Nazi officials and collaborators were tried and convicted by post-war European governments. The next major human rights violation was the next officially recognized genocide, which occurred in Yugoslavia. Serbs gathered together 8,000 Muslim men, stripped them of their property and basic human rights, and then murdered them. Also, during the civil war in Rwanda, between 800,000 and 1 million Hutus and Tutsis were killed. War crime tribunals are going on right now in both Yugoslavia and Rwanda, with full sentencing still in the future. So far, 161 people have been indicted by the International War Crime Tribunal in Yugoslavia, and 79 people have been indicted in Rwanda. It is estimated that since the Holocaust, close to 100 million people have died as a result of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Cambodia alone lost between 25 and 30% of its population, or close to 2 million people, to political execution, forced labor, and starvation during the reign of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. Clearly, this is not an old issue, but a new one that needs to be currently addressed. You may feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the issues of human rights. However, there is one small part that you can help with. You can try and stay on top of what's going on in the world. Secondly, you can care. It is important that we care about torture, detention, and refugees more than we care about, say, the newest sandwich at McDonald's, the latest fashion, the stock market, or the Super Bowl. There is a segment of the population here in Ithaca that are Burmese refugees, and my 4-H club spent one fun afternoon cleaning up an apartment for them to live in. We've also helped tutor recent immigrants in West Village. Lastly, when genocide is occurring or evil dictators are in power, you can write letters to both our government and to the UN, urging action. Numerous atrocities have happened because the world didn't react in time. That is not acceptable. When people are dying at a fast rate, we have to do something about it. Are there any questions?